After dating for 5 years, my fiancé told me he wasn't sure about marrying me. Then, in front of his friends, he joked, "If you were prettier, I'd marry you this morning." His mom called me in tears. Dominic and I have been together for just over 5 years, engaged for the last 8 months. We met through mutual friends at a housewarming party. Just two people bonding over a shared hatred of IPAs and a love for 90s cartoons. Our relationship moved at a comfortable pace, dating for a year, moving in together after 2, adopting our cat Beans in year 3, and getting engaged last summer. The proposal wasn't extravagant, just a Saturday morning hike to our favorite lookout point where he nervously fumbled the ring box out of his pocket. I said yes immediately. We set the date for this October and slowly started planning everything. Well, mostly I planned while he just nodded along. About 3 months ago, Dominic started making odd comments whenever we talked about wedding plans. Nothing harsh, just hesitant. When I showed him potential venues, he'd say things like, "That's a lot of money for just one day," or "Do we really need to invite all those people?" I brushed it off as normal guy behavior or budget concerns. Then he started replying slower to my wedding-related texts. I'd send caterer options, and hours later he'd respond with, "Looks fine," or "Whatever you want." When I asked if everything was okay, he'd say he was just busy at work. His construction company had taken on big projects, so it made sense. Last month, he started hanging out more with his work friend Paul, grabbing beers after work or watching games at Paul's place. It didn't seem strange at first, just more frequent than usual. But when he'd come home, he felt distant, checking his phone constantly and showing less affection. I tried talking to my best friend Lena about it. She thought it might just be pre-wedding jitters and suggested we have a date night to reconnect. So last Friday, I made reservations at a new Italian restaurant downtown. I wore a nice dress. Nothing fancy, just something I hadn't worn in a while, and even stocked the fridge with Dominic's favorite beer for when we got home. The date night was a disaster. He seemed distracted the entire time, barely engaging in conversation. When I brought up finalizing our honeymoon plans, he dropped the bomb. He wasn't sure if he was ready for all of this. Not just the honeymoon, the wedding, marriage, everything. I was stunned. 5 years together, 8 months engaged, and now he wasn't sure. When I pressed him, he said he'd been talking with Paul about how marriage changes things and mentioned Paul's brother's messy divorce. The conversation spiraled from there. I tried to stay calm in the restaurant, but inside, I felt my world collapsing. We barely touched our entrees. The ride home was silent, thick with tension. When we got back to our apartment, he brushed off any further talk, saying he needed time to think, then went to sleep on the couch. The next morning was painfully awkward. We moved around like strangers sharing an Airbnb. He mentioned going out with Paul and some work friends to watch the game at the Rusty Nail, a sports bar downtown. I was too emotionally drained to argue. A few hours later, Lena convinced me to get out of the house. We went for coffee and I told her everything. She listened patiently and said it might still be cold feet. Afterward, we wandered around Target, my go-to stress relief. I bought throw pillows I didn't need and new shampoo because retail therapy is still therapy, right? By early evening, I felt calmer and decided to head home. As I was pulling into our apartment complex, I got a text from Kyler, one of Dominic's coworkers I'd met at their Christmas party. The message said, "Hey, are you okay?" Things got weird at the Rusty Nail. My stomach dropped. I called him instead of replying. At first, Kyler sounded uncomfortable and didn't want to get involved, but when I pressed him, he finally told me what happened. Apparently, the guys had been teasing Dominic about the wedding. When Paul asked if he was ready to be with one woman forever, Dominic said, while drunk, "If you were prettier, I'd be more excited about marrying you." Then he laughed it off like it was a joke. Kyler said a few of the guys called him out for it, but Dominic just got defensive and said they couldn't take a joke. I sat in my car crying for 20 minutes after that call. The man I'd loved for 5 years, who I thought loved me, had publicly joked that my looks were the reason he wasn't sure about marrying me. When I finally went inside, Dominic was passed out on the couch, still in his clothes from earlier. The apartment reeked of stale beer. I took Beans into the bedroom and locked the door. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon, Dominic's classic apology breakfast. He looked hungover and sheepish, clearly hoping food would fix things. When I confronted him about what Kyler had told me, his face fell. He immediately tried to downplay it, saying he was drunk and just being stupid. According to him, The guys were just ragging on him about being tied down. He said he'd just blurted something dumb to shut them up. His defense of guys being guys only made things worse. We argued, me asking how he could humiliate me in front of his friends, him insisting that it wasn't his intention. He tried to explain that he was just stressed about wedding costs and the pressure of it all. But I couldn't get past the fact that he'd used my appearance as the punchline to a cruel joke. I couldn't stay in the apartment with him. I grabbed my purse and headed to my brother Elliot's place. He's always been my safe harbor during rough times. When I told him what happened, he was furious, ready to drive over and confront Dominic himself. I managed to calm him down, explaining that I just needed some space and a place to stay while I figured things out. Throughout Sunday, Dominic kept texting me. Long apologies, short ones, pleased to come home and talk. I only replied once, saying I needed time. On Monday morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't face answering phones at the dental office while pretending everything was fine. Around 9 a.m., my phone rang. It was Valerie, Dominic's mom. We've always gotten along really well. Honestly, she's been more supportive of our relationship than my own mother, who lives in Florida with husband number 3. Valerie sounded upset. She said Dominic had called her the night before, and that there was something important I needed to know.
She asked if we could meet somewhere to talk, so that's where I am now. Sitting in my car outside the coffee shop where I'm supposed to meet Valerie in 15 minutes.
Wondering what else there could possibly be to know, and if my 5-year relationship is completely over. I never thought I'd be writing a post like this. I keep looking down at my engagement ring, wondering if I should have seen this coming. Was I blind? Or did things really change this suddenly? Should I even hear Valerie out? What could she possibly say that would make any of this okay? First, thank you all for the overwhelming support on my original post. I didn't expect thousands of comments. I tried to read as many as I could, between crying sessions and stress eating the emergency Oreos from my brother's pantry. For those asking, yes. I met with Valerie, Dominic's mom. I'll get to that at the end of this update. A lot has happened over the past 2 days, and I'm still trying to process everything. After posting on Monday, I called in sick again. My boss was understanding. I've only used 2 sick days in the past year, and apparently, I sounded like death over the phone. I spent most of the morning in Elliot's spare room/storage closet, scrolling through your comments and trying to gather my thoughts. Around noon, Lena came over on her lunch break with sandwiches from that deli near the hospital where she works. I hadn't eaten much since Sunday, so even though I wasn't hungry, I forced myself to take a few bites. Lena gently reminded me that I couldn't avoid Dominic forever. We lived together, had joint accounts, and eventually, I'd have to talk to him. She was right. I couldn't hide at my brother's place indefinitely, especially since Elliot's girlfriend was coming over for dinner that night. The last thing I wanted was to be the sad third wheel at their Taco Tuesday. After Lena left, I took a shower, borrowed one of Elliot's hoodies, don't judge, it was comforting, and drove back to my apartment. The whole way there, I rehearsed what I wanted to say. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to be calm, mature, and get some real answers. When I pulled into our parking spot, I saw Dominic's truck. He should have been at work. My stomach twisted as I walked up the stairs to our second-floor unit. I unlocked the door and found him on the couch in sweats, looking like he hadn't slept. He was surrounded by wedding planning binders I'd put together over the last 8 months. Beans was curled up beside him, the little traitor. He looked surprised and relieved to see me. When I asked why he wasn't at work, he said he'd taken personal time. Apparently, he'd spent the morning looking through all the wedding plans, trying to figure out how he messed up so badly. I stayed standing by the door. I wasn't ready to sit next to him. I told him that staring at wedding plans wasn't going to fix what he said. What followed was a long, difficult conversation. He apologized again for the bar comment, calling it inexcusable and claiming he didn't even believe it. When I asked why he would say something he didn't mean, he said he was just trying to look cool in front of his friends, which somehow made me even angrier. I brought up the comments he'd made at dinner, before the bar incident, reminding him that he'd already expressed doubts about our wedding even when he was sober. He admitted he'd been feeling stressed about a lot of things, a work project falling behind schedule, Paul constantly sharing marriage horror stories, and anxiety over our wedding budget. But instead of talking to me about any of it, he'd bottled everything up until it exploded in the worst possible way. As our conversation went on, He revealed something new: fears about turning into his father. Dominic rarely talked about his dad. He left when Dominic was 12, after having an affair with a coworker and moving to Arizona to start a new family. Dominic always claimed it didn't affect him much, but now he confessed that he worried he might have some kind of genetic predisposition to cheat or abandon his family, too. I told him he wasn't his father, and that genetics don't determine the kind of partner you become. His response was telling. He said he wasn't sure if he could really promise forever when forever felt impossible, based on what he'd witnessed growing up. When I asked if he'd talked to anyone else about these fears, he hesitated before admitting that he'd been opening up to Kyler sometimes. Apparently, they'd gotten closer since Kyler joined the company, and Kyler had gone through some relationship issues of his own. It clicked then. That's why Kyler had called me about the bar incident. He already knew about Dominic's doubts. The conversation took another difficult turn when I asked what exactly Dominic had been feeling. His answer was painfully honest: scared, overwhelmed, and uncertain about marriage, despite loving me. He said he kept thinking about how his parents seemed happy until suddenly they weren't, and he was terrified of repeating that same pattern with us. When I asked why he hadn't told me all this sooner, he said he was afraid I'd think he didn't love me enough. The irony wasn't lost on me. By hiding his fears, he'd created exactly the situation he was trying to avoid. When I asked if his joke about my appearance came from any real feelings of unattraction, he immediately said no, that he'd always found me attractive. He even brought up our first meeting at the housewarming party, recalling details like my green sweater and how terrible he'd been at beer pong that night. According to him, that cruel comment came from insecurity, a stupid, misguided attempt to look confident in front of his friends instead of looking whipped or trapped. As we kept talking, I asked the question that scared me most. Were his doubts about marriage in general, or about marrying me specifically? His hesitation before answering told me everything. He finally admitted that while his fears were mostly about marriage and commitment, part of him also wondered if we were truly right for each other long term. That hurt more than the appearance comment ever could. 5 years together, and he was still questioning whether we were right for each other. When I pressed for specifics, he said we'd both changed since our early 20s, that I'd become more of a planner while he missed the spontaneity we used to have, and that he'd given up on his old dream of starting his own business. I pointed out that change and growth are normal in any long relationship, but he questioned whether we'd grown together or apart. By that point, I was emotionally drained. I told him I needed time away to process everything: the public humiliation, his hidden doubts, and now his uncertainty about our future. He pleaded for us to work through it together, offering to try therapy or couples counseling, but I stood firm about needing space. As I was about to pack more clothes, he mentioned that my phone had been buzzing. I checked it: 3 missed calls from Valerie. With everything happening, I'd completely forgotten our planned coffee meeting. When I told Dominic, his expression shifted. First confusion, then concern. He asked what his mom wanted to talk about, so I explained how she'd called crying the previous morning, saying she needed to discuss something important after their Sunday night conversation. His reaction was instant. The color drained from his face and he wouldn't meet my eyes. When I asked what he'd told her, he vaguely said they'd talked about our fight and his doubts, but his evasiveness made me suspicious. When I pressed further, he said it wasn't his place to explain and that I should hear whatever it was from his mom directly. I stepped away and called Valerie. She answered immediately, clearly concerned that I hadn't shown up for our meeting. I told her I was at the apartment talking with Dominic. Her voice changed. Something in her tone sounded strange when I mentioned him being there. That only made me more certain there was something important I didn't know. We arranged to meet in 30 minutes. When I hung up, I confronted Dominic again, asking what his mom knew that I didn't. He finally looked up at me, his expression a mix of guilt and resignation, and said there was something he should have told me himself. Then he added quietly that I should go talk to his mom. He said he'd be gone when I got back. When I returned, if that's even what you could call it, I quickly packed enough clothes for a week, along with my toiletries and laptop. At the door, Dominic told me he loved me. I told him that sometimes love just isn't enough. On my way to meet Valerie, my phone rang. It was Karina, Dominic's sister. She sounded anxious, asking what was going on between us. She said she'd heard about the bar incident from Paul and that Dominic wasn't answering her texts, while their mom seemed really upset. When I mentioned I was heading to meet Valerie, Karina paused, surprised. Then she asked quietly, "Wait, is this about Maria?" The name hit me like a truck. "What about Maria?" I asked. Karina's shocked silence, followed by her quick backpedaling, told me she'd just revealed something she wasn't supposed to. She apologized and urged me to hear Valerie out, refusing to explain further no matter how much I pressed. By the time I pulled into the coffee shop parking lot, my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. Through the window, I spotted Valerie already sitting at a table, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. Whatever she was about to tell me, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. As I walked toward her, my phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. "Whatever my mom tells you, please remember that I do love you. I just got scared and made terrible mistakes. I'll understand if you can't forgive me." I put my phone away, took a deep breath, and sat down across from Valerie. Thank you all for the support on my previous posts. Reading your comments has been both comforting and overwhelming. I haven't been able to reply to many, but please know I've read them, and I truly appreciate the advice. I'm writing this from a new location, Lena's apartment. After meeting with Valerie yesterday, I couldn't bring myself to go back to Elliot's or to the apartment I shared with Dominic. Lena has a pull-out couch that's slightly more comfortable than Elliot's storage room futon, and her cat Pepper doesn't judge me for crying into my cereal at 2 a.m. So, the meeting with Valerie. Where do I even start? The coffee shop was busy for a Tuesday afternoon. The local community college must have just let out, because most of the tables were filled with students typing on laptops. Valerie had managed to grab a corner booth with tall backs that offered at least the illusion of privacy. She looked different from the last time I'd seen her, just 3 weeks ago at our monthly family dinner. Her usually perfect bob was slightly disheveled, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. In the 5 years I've known her, I've never seen Valerie without at least mascara and lipstick. She's not vain. It's just part of her routine, like how some people can't start their day without coffee. When I arrived, she stood to hug me. She smelled faintly like the lavender dryer sheets she always uses. I ordered a black coffee, even though what I really wanted was one of those caramel drinks piled high with whipped cream. But somehow, ordering something sweet and frivolous felt wrong for this kind of conversation. After some awkward small talk, Valerie got straight to the point. Dominic had called her Sunday night in a complete emotional meltdown. While she acknowledged that his fears about commitment and turning into his father were real, there was something more immediate behind his behavior. Maria, I nearly choked on my coffee. Maria, the new project coordinator at Dominic's company. The woman he'd mentioned casually a few times in passing. As Valerie explained, nervously shredding a napkin into tiny pieces, Dominic had developed feelings for Maria over the past few months. Nothing physical had happened, at least according to what he'd told his mother, but there was an emotional connection. One strong enough to make him start questioning everything about our relationship. I sat there in shock, trying to process her words. The whole coffee shop seemed to tilt sideways. As she kept talking, I was silently connecting the dots, building a timeline. Maria had started at Dominic's company around New Year's. I'd met her briefly at their holiday party in March. By then, Dominic had already started acting differently, more distant, glued to his phone, spending extra time with work friends. What I'd written off as job stress now looked like something else entirely. When I asked Valerie why she was telling me this, instead of protecting her son, her eyes welled up. That's when it clicked, the parallel to her own past. Before Dominic's father left for Arizona with his coworker, there had been months of distance, hurtful comments, and meaningless arguments, all designed to push her away instead of telling her the truth. She didn't want to see history repeat itself, didn't want me left in the dark while Dominic took the coward's way out. Suddenly, the cruel comment at the bar made sense. It wasn't just drunken stupidity, it was a subconscious attempt to sabotage our relationship so he wouldn't have to make the hard choice himself. We talked for over an hour. Valerie shared more about her own marriage, how she'd tried to save it even after discovering the affair, and how she'd blamed herself for not being enough. Before we parted ways in the parking lot, She said something that's been echoing in my head ever since. The hardest lesson I ever learned was that you can't make someone choose you. They either do or they don't, and anything in between is just delaying the inevitable. I sat in my car for a long time afterward, just staring at my phone. There were 3 new texts from Dominic, all some variation of "I'm sorry" and "I love you." Not a single mention of Maria, still hiding the full truth. Instead of responding, I called Lena and asked if I could crash at her place. She didn't hesitate or ask questions, just said she was already making up the pull-out couch and would pick up dinner on her way home. That's the kind of friend everyone deserves in a crisis. I finally texted Dominic back. "I know about Maria. Don't contact me again until you're ready to tell me the complete truth. I'll be collecting more of my things tomorrow while you're at work." Then I blocked his number, not permanently, just for the night. I needed space to think without his excuses or half-truths. On the drive to Lena's, Karina called. The conversation confirmed everything Valerie had told me and added another layer. She said she'd overheard Dominic and Paul talking about the situation last Thursday. She'd confronted her brother and made him promise to be honest with me after the weekend. Clearly, he hadn't followed through. What surprised me most was Karina's unwavering support, even though she was his sister. She made it clear she was on my side. The relief I felt was enormous. I'd been terrified I'd lose not just Dominic, but his entire family, people who'd become my family over the years. Lena's apartment was exactly what I needed that night, neutral ground. A space where I could just exist without explaining myself. We ate dinner sitting on her living room floor, the coffee table cluttered with papers from her online class. We half-watched a baking competition neither of us were really paying attention to. The simple normality of it all felt like a life preserver in the middle of my emotional storm. After Lena went to bed, I stayed up scrolling through my phone. 5 years of memories with Dominic. Vacations, holidays, random selfies on ordinary days. Our engagement photos showed us grinning like we'd won the lottery. I started mentally planning for the next day, going to the apartment while he was at work, packing more of my things, maybe talking to the landlord about breaking the lease. Then my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Margot, this is Maria. I know you blocked Dominic. Can we meet tomorrow? There's more to the story that you should know." Just the 2 of us. I just stared at the message, my heart pounding. What more could there possibly be? And why would she want to tell me directly? After what felt like an hour, though it was probably only a few minutes, I typed my response. Where and when? First, thank you all again for the overwhelming support on my previous posts. I've been reading your comments during sleepless nights, and they've helped more than you can imagine. For those asking how I'm doing, I'm surviving. Some moments are easier than others. The meeting with Maria happened, and it went nothing like I expected. We met at a little breakfast place near the park, neutral territory, I guess. When I arrived, she was already there, nervously scrolling through her phone. She looked different than I remembered from the company party. Less polished, more human somehow. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore almost no makeup. What surprised me most was how uncomfortable she seemed. If she'd been having some secret emotional affair with my fiancé, shouldn't she have been more confident? Instead, she kept fidgeting with her coffee cup, avoiding eye contact. The conversation revealed 2 major bombshells. First, Maria had no idea Dominic had developed feelings for her, not until Paul mentioned it casually last week. According to her, she and Dominic had worked closely together on a project and occasionally texted about work after hours, but nothing that crossed any lines. From her perspective, she'd never flirted with him or encouraged anything beyond friendship. She even showed me their text history, mostly work messages, a few memes, nothing romantic or inappropriate. She also had a boyfriend of 3 years, who sometimes joined their group for happy hours. The second revelation was about Paul. Apparently, he'd been deliberately stirring things. Maria said she'd overheard him at work, encouraging Dominic to explore his options. Before settling down, specifically mentioning her as someone who gets Dominic better than I do, she explained that Paul had been telling everyone. At work, Paul had apparently been telling everyone that Dominic was getting cold feet about the wedding, making jokes about him being trapped or missing out on his freedom. By the end of my meeting with Maria, I felt strangely calm. She wasn't the villain I'd imagined. She was just a bystander, caught between manipulation and Dominic's weakness. Before we parted ways, she said something that stuck with me. "You seem like someone who knows their worth. Don't let anyone make you question it." I left that meeting with a new perspective and a plan. This wasn't just about Dominic and me anymore. It was about Paul's toxic influence, Dominic's unresolved family history, and figuring out where I fit into all of it. I texted Karina afterward, asking if she'd help arrange a family meeting at her apartment, neutral territory. I wasn't ready to be alone with Dominic yet. She agreed immediately. That brings me to yesterday's dinner. Karina had set everything up in her small but cozy apartment. She'd ordered food from that little Italian place near her building. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. Valerie arrived first, then Paul, at Karina's insistence, and finally Dominic, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. The first 20 minutes were excruciating. We all sat around Karina's dining table, pushing pasta around our plates, making awkward small talk about the weather and her new coffee table. The elephant in the room was practically stealing food off our plates, but no one wanted to acknowledge it. Finally, Valerie broke the silence. She said bluntly that we weren't there for a social gathering. We were there to address what had been happening and find a way forward. That opened the floodgates. I shared everything I'd learned from Maria, watching Paul's face carefully as I spoke. The way his expression shifted, from confusion to defensiveness, told me everything. He tried to interrupt, claiming he was just looking out for his friend, but Karina shut him down immediately. Dominic mostly sat in silence, staring at his barely touched pasta. When directly addressed, he admitted that Maria had just been friendly, but he'd turned it into something else because he was scared of turning into his dad. Valerie visibly flinched at that. When I brought up the joke at the bar, Dominic looked genuinely ashamed. He admitted it had nothing to do with Maria, that he'd just been a coward. Paul had been teasing him about being whipped, and instead of standing up for our relationship, he said something cruel to seem cool. According to Dominic, it was never about my looks. Paul tried to brush it all off as just guy talk, but Karina immediately reminded everyone that Dominic and I were supposed to get married in 3 months. That simple statement, the reminder of our rapidly approaching wedding, hit me like a physical blow. The save the dates had already gone out. Deposits were paid. My dress was hanging in Lena's spare closet, waiting for final alterations. That's when I quietly said I didn't think the wedding was happening anymore. The room went completely silent. Dominic started to protest, but I cut him off. I explained how I'd spent the last week trying to understand how we got here, and what I'd realized was that this wasn't just about Maria or that joke, or even Paul's toxic influence. It was about Dominic not being honest, with me or with himself. I told them how I'd ignored the signs for months. His disinterest in wedding planning, the extra time spent with Paul, the growing emotional distance. I'd made excuses because it was easier than facing the truth. But I deserved someone who was certain about me, someone who didn't need a family intervention to figure out how they felt. Paul made a snarky comment about me being dramatic, which earned him simultaneous shut up responses from both Valerie and Karina. Dominic insisted he was certain about loving me, just scared of messing everything up. I pointed out that he already had. The conversation dragged on for hours. Tears, raised voices, painful truths. Karina and Paul clashed the most, reopening old wounds while uncovering new ones. By midnight, when everyone was emotionally drained, we finally reached the inevitable conclusion. The wedding was off. Our 5-year relationship had run its course. It wasn't a screaming match or a dramatic exit, just a quiet, mutual recognition that something fundamental had broken between us. Maybe it could be rebuilt one day, but not in time for an October wedding. Not with Maria still at his company. Not with the echo of that joke still lingering between us. Karina drove me back to Lena's place afterward, assuring me that none of this changed how she or Valerie felt about me. According to her, I was still family, no matter what happened with Dominic. When I got back to Lena's apartment, I sat on the pull-out couch in the dark, letting reality wash over me. 5 years, gone, wedding canceled. Future unknown. I didn't cry right away. Instead, I opened the Notes app on my phone and made a list. Call venue to cancel. Deposit probably gone. Return the ring. Contact guests. Move out of the apartment. Change relationship status on social media. It was past 2 a.m. when Lena shuffled out of her bedroom, half asleep but concerned. She'd heard me come in and wanted to check on me. When Lena asked if I was okay and I told her the wedding was off, she didn't say anything. She just sat beside me on the pull-out couch and wrapped her arm around my shoulders. We stayed like that until sunrise, not talking, not crying, just existing in the strangeness of my new reality. This morning, I woke up to a text from Dominic asking if we could meet to discuss practical matters, the apartment lease, separating our finances, what to do with the furniture we'd bought together. So adult, so final. There was also a message from Elliot, my brother, asking when he should come over to help me pack. Ever practical? And one from my mom, who'd somehow already heard through the grapevine, probably from one of my cousins who follows. Karina on Instagram, asking if she should cancel her flight for the wedding. The ring feels heavy on my finger now. I keep twisting it absently, a nervous habit I didn't realize I had. It's a simple design, a round diamond in a white gold setting. Nothing flashy or elaborate. Dominic chose it because it was classic, like our relationship. The irony isn't lost on me. I called the venue this morning. The coordinator was kind but firm. The deposit was non-refundable this close to the date. $8,000 gone. Money we'd saved for over a year, cutting back on vacations, new clothes, and dinners out. The practical side of me winces at the waste. The emotional side doesn't care about money right now. Karina texted later to say she'd found a photographer willing to transfer our deposit to a future event, and Valerie offered to contact family members about the cancellation to spare me the awkward conversations. Small kindnesses in the aftermath. Paul, unsurprisingly, sent a half-hearted text about how these things happen for a reason and how I'd find someone better suited eventually. I deleted it without responding. Maria sent a short message, too, apologizing for everything and assuring me again that nothing had happened between her and Dominic. I believe her. Strangely enough, she feels like collateral damage in all this, a convenient projection of Dominic's fears and Paul's manipulation. The hardest part now is the mundane reminders. The wedding planning binder still sitting in my tote bag, the shared Spotify playlist we'd built for the reception, the honeymoon research folder on my laptop, little fragments of a future that no longer exists. Lena suggested I take a mental health day from work, but I decided to go in. Sitting at home, scrolling through Reddit and overthinking everything, felt worse than the distraction of answering phones and filing insurance claims. My coworkers have been mercifully normal. Either they don't know yet, or they're politely pretending not to notice my puffy eyes and the bare spot on my finger where the ring used to be. I'm meeting Dominic tomorrow at a coffee shop to exchange keys and talk about the apartment. He's agreed to move out since my name is on the lease and he can stay with his cousin for now. Another practical conversation in the slow, painful business of dismantling a relationship. Part of me still can't believe this is happening. Last month, we were debating reception songs and tasting cake samples. Now, we're dividing up kitchen appliances and deciding who keeps the PlayStation. I keep thinking about something Valerie said at dinner. Endings are rarely clean or perfect. Most of the time, they're messy and sad and complicated. She would know. She rebuilt her life after Dominic's father left. Raised 2 kids alone. Found happiness again eventually. Looking at her now, you'd never guess she went through something so painful. Maybe there's hope in that. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. Tomorrow, I'll handle the apartment and the finances. Next week, I'll start looking for my own place. The future beyond that is blurry, but it exists. Karina just texted, asking if I want to meet for coffee this weekend. She mentioned that her family friend Kenzo, an older gentleman who's known their family forever, offered his vacation cabin if I need a quiet place to get away. The support from Dominic's family is unexpected, but deeply appreciated. I haven't decided if I'll take Kenzo up on his offer. Part of me wants to escape somewhere quiet and process everything. Another part knows I need my people right now. Lena with her practical compassion, Elliot with his protective big brother energy, even Valerie and Karina with their complicated loyalty. What I do know is that I won't be checking my wedding countdown app anymore. I won't be pinning reception decor ideas or practicing a new signature with Dominic's last name. That future is gone, And while I don't know what comes next, I'm starting to believe there will be something. It feels strange to be writing this from my new apartment. It's been 3 months since the family dinner that ended my engagement. 3 months of piecing my life back together in ways I never expected. Some of you have asked for an update, so here it is. The good, the bad, and the unexpected first. The practical stuff. Dominic moved out of our shared apartment within a week of the breakup. Elliot and Lena helped me pack up his things while he was at work, leaving the boxes neatly labeled in the living room for him to collect. It was surreal, separating 5 years of shared existence into his and mine. The coffee maker he'd gotten for his birthday. The throw blanket I'd bought on our weekend trip to that little mountain town. The framed photos we'd hung on every wall. After he was gone, the apartment felt hollow, like a stage set after the actors have left. I lasted 2 more weeks there before the lease manager agreed to let me break the contract with an extra month's payment. It was worth every penny just to escape the ghost of our relationship that lingered in every room. Finding a new place was harder than I expected. The rental market is brutal right now, and my budget as a single person is considerably tighter. I eventually landed in a small 1-bedroom across town, further from work, but with a tiny balcony where I've started growing herbs in dollar store pots. The basil keeps dying. The mint, though, is thriving against all odds. I choose to see that as symbolic. Financially, it's been an adjustment. All the shared expenses suddenly fell on me. Car insurance, streaming services, even groceries somehow cost more when you're cooking for one. I've become that person who clips digital coupons, buys store brands, tracks expenses in a spreadsheet, and thinks twice before ordering takeout. Grown-up stuff I never thought I'd have to learn at 29. The wedding vendors were surprisingly kind. The venue kept our deposit, but sent a handwritten note wishing me happiness. The florist refunded half our payment, despite a strict no-refund policy. And the DJ, bless him, recommended his brother, who works at a therapy center. An unexpected but thoughtful gesture. The engagement ring sits in my dresser drawer in its original box. Dominic said I should keep it or sell it, that it would be bad karma for him to take it back. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. Some days I forget it's there. Other days I open the box and just stare. It's strange how something so small could once represent something so big. Social media was its own special kind of hell. I waited 2 weeks before changing my relationship status, dreading the flood of questions. When I finally did it, at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, the notifications poured in anyway. Well-meaning friends asking what happened. Distant relatives offering thoughts and prayers. Former classmates sliding into my DMs with faux concern that felt a lot like curiosity. I posted a short, vague statement about a mutual decision and requesting privacy, then muted notifications and threw my phone across the couch. A few days later, I posted a photo of my new apartment keys with the caption, "New Beginnings." It got fewer likes than my engagement announcement, but somehow, it felt far more genuine. Now, about Dominic. We've spoken a handful of times since the breakup, mostly about practical things. Mail that got sent to the wrong address. The shared cloud storage we forgot to separate. Returning a borrowed air fryer to his sister. Each conversation has been civil, but strained, like 2 acquaintances forced to make small talk in an elevator. He's still at the same company. Still friends with Paul, though Karina mentioned they've had some falling out recently. He's still living at his cousin's place. The situation with Maria, unsurprisingly, got awkward after our breakup. She requested a transfer to a different team and has been distant toward him ever since learning the full story. The biggest surprise came last month. Dominic texted, asking if we could meet. We hadn't seen each other face to face since the key exchange, and part of me was curious. We met at a coffee shop near my new place, neutral territory with plenty of witnesses. As Lena half-jokingly suggested, he looked different, thinner. Darker circles under his eyes. Wearing a shirt I didn't recognize. The first 10 minutes were stiff, small talk about weather, and work, until he pulled a small leather journal from his bag. "I've been seeing someone," he said. My heart did a weird, involuntary stutter until he clarified. "A therapist." The journal was part of his therapy. Daily reflections on patterns and behaviors he wanted to change. He told me he'd been unpacking his relationship with his father, his toxic friendship with Paul, and the way he treated me. He didn't ask for forgiveness or reconciliation. He just wanted me to know he was working on himself. "I should have done this years ago," he said quietly. "Maybe things would have been different." It was the most self-aware I'd ever seen him, and I found myself genuinely hoping therapy helps him. Not for my sake, that ship has sailed, but because carrying around that much inherited pain looked exhausting. Before we parted ways, he mentioned he'd heard I still keep in touch with Dominic's mom and sister. I'm glad he said they need good people in their lives because they truly are. That's been one of the strangest parts of this breakup. Maintaining relationships with Dominic's family while disconnecting from him. Valerie texts me once a week, usually sending funny memes or photos of her garden. Karina and I have breakfast every other Sunday at a little diner halfway between our apartments. They've both been careful not to put me in uncomfortable positions or share too much about Dominic, always respecting the boundaries I've set. As for me personally, I'd love to say I've had some grand awakening that I've found myself through heartbreak. But the reality is messier. Some days I feel liberated, relieved that I didn't marry someone capable of hurting me so carelessly. Other days, usually when my water heater acts up or I can't reach something on the top shelf that Dominic used to grab for me, I miss the practical comforts of partnership. I've started therapy too, not because of the breakup itself, but because it forced me to realize how much I'd compromised within it, how many red flags I'd ignored because they came wrapped in the comfort of familiarity, how often I'd shrunk myself to make room for Dominic's needs and insecurities. My therapist suggested I try reclaiming the parts of myself that got lost along the way. So I've started hiking again on Saturday mornings, something I stopped doing because Dominic always complained about waking up early on weekends. Dating again feels like a distant concept. My coworkers keep hinting about some great guy they want to set me up with, but I'm not ready. Maybe in a few months, maybe longer. Right now, I'm just learning how to be comfortable in my own company. The most unexpected thing came from what should have been the saddest task, canceling our honeymoon. We'd booked a 10-day trip to the coast, a small cottage with a deck overlooking the water. Non-refundable, of course. For weeks, I ignored the reminder in my calendar, unable to face losing that deposit too. Then Lena suggested something radical. Take the trip anyway. "You've never traveled alone," she said. Maybe it's time. The idea terrified me at first. 10 days alone in a romantic cottage meant for two? It sounded like the setup for a sad indie film, but the more I thought about it, the more appealing it became. I could wake up when I wanted, explore without compromise,
Read an entire book in one sitting if I felt like it, so that's where I'm headed next week, to our honeymoon cottage.
solo. I've packed 3 paperbacks, downloaded a few podcasts, and even splurged on a new swimsuit chosen purely for comfort, not for how it might look to someone else. My mom thinks I'm crazy. Elliot offered to come with me for part of the trip. I declined. Karina joked that I should download a dating app just to see who's out there. Maybe, but probably not. I don't know what I'll find on this non-honeymoon honeymoon. Maybe clarity, maybe more questions, definitely some sunburn, knowing my luck with sunscreen. The other day, I was grocery shopping when our song came on over the store speakers. 3 months ago, I would have hidden in the frozen food section, fighting back tears. This time, I just felt a slight twinge, like pressing on a bruise that's mostly healed. Progress, not perfection. I won't pretend I have everything figured out. My new apartment's shower still has mysterious temperature moods. I killed yet another basil plant yesterday, and I still occasionally grab my phone to text Dominic something funny, before remembering we don't do that anymore. But I'm okay. Maybe not the triumphant kind of okay, just the quiet, steady kind. And for now, that's enough.